What's going on, everybody? Happy New Year. It's been a while since I've been with you guys, so it's going to take me a minute to get into the groove, I think, here. But I want to thank you for joining us here on the Mission Ready Men podcast on the SHR Media Network. Today is New Year's Eve, December 31st, Tuesday, December 31st. Since I haven't been with you all in a while, we do have a lot to get into. I'm probably not going to get to everything I really want to, but we do have some things to get into. We have some explosive news in the Derek Chauvin case. The ATF botched another raid, and we will talk a little bit about the passing of Jimmy Carter. President Trump continues to win, and he had some help with this latest win from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who I really wish he had been nominated by Trump as his Attorney General, but we're happy to have him here in Texas. And also, we're going to talk about a case, the most perfect probably case for term limits that we can think of. So we'll get into all of that. But before we do, go ahead and do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, share this video. Yeah, go ahead and do that. Like, share, comment. Anyway, the more you do like and share and interact with the videos, the more people we can reach, and the less beholden we are to the big tech tyrants. We know that they have been making noises about free speech and going down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring and stuff like that, but they're still suppressing our content. Just because the head honchos go down there and make those noises, they still have their minions back at the office doing what they do, and that is censor us and suppress our content. So the best thing you can do for us on that front is pray. We would appreciate your prayers. The Bible says the effective, fervent prayer of the righteous man avails much. So pray that we can continue to reach everybody, reach as many people as we possibly can, so that we can spread the word. But thank you for joining us here on the SHR Media Network, where you can catch all of the other great shows, The Edge of Liberty with Sackhead Sean, The Reverb Common Sense with Jersey Joe, and BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon with the incredible BZ himself. And you can also follow us on all the socials at Mission Ready Men on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, Truth Social, and I think we're on a couple of others, but I'm not very active on them at the moment. I should be, and I'm going to make an effort in 2025 to be better at that. But for just bear with us. And for our merch, like this cool shirt right here, New Year, Same God. Head over to missionreadymen.com, hit shop, and check out this design and all the other cool designs that we have. All right, I think that's all the business to get out of the way. So let's get after it. Now, it is New Year's Eve. I know shows traditionally do a year-end recap and all that stuff. We're not gonna do that. I am gonna be on with the SHR crew tonight to ring in the new year. So I'm sure we'll get into a lot of year-end recap, the year that was. We'll get into all that tonight. And it will be starting at 10 p.m. Central. But yeah, there's a lot of other things that we do want to talk about, since I haven't been with you over a week now, I think. So we're going to do that right now. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Earlier this week, or actually I think it was last week now, I came across a post in a group that I belong to on social media, where someone said that owning a gun, using a gun for your protection, goes against the teaching of the Bible. That is complete and utter nonsense. And I didn't say that to the poster. In fact, that post got taken down before I had a chance to actually finish my thoughts on it at the time. But it's total nonsense. And I mean, all you have to do is look at David and Goliath. David had a slingshot and stones. He didn't just lay down and say, if it's my time, it's my time. No. So that's nonsense. David had his elite warrior Benaiah, who was just a force on the battlefield. And if you're not willing and able to do battle in the name of the Lord, then what's the point? What's the point? In fact, let's take a look at this right here, because this is an often quoted passage, and it just illustrates the point perfectly that anyone who believes that owning a gun or being a pacifist is the way to honor God just doesn't know the Bible. But here it is in Luke 22, verse 36. Wrong one. Let's do that. Yeah. No, let's not do that. All right, there we go. We'll go with that one. Luke 22, chapter 36. He said to them, "But now the one who has a money bag, take it, and likewise a knapsack, and let the one who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one." Now, obviously, they didn't have guns back in these days, but they had swords. Swords was the gun, the weapon of choice at the time. And Jesus was telling his disciples to buy a sword. Now, was he telling them to buy a sword just so they could lay it down and let whatever was going to happen happen? Of course not. Of course not. I had someone a long time ago, probably 7 or 8 years now. I can't remember exactly what the case was, but there was a gun case, a gun violence case, and I got into it with this person, and they said to me that nobody should own a gun under any circumstances. And I said, well, if somebody breaks into your home and you call the police, but you live in a rural area and it's going to take a sheriff's deputy 20 minutes to get there, most of these incidents end in 2 or 3 minutes. Are you just supposed to sit there and take it? And this person actually said to me, if it's your time, it's your time, and you can't fight that ish. That makes absolutely no sense. And here's the thing, especially for men out there, it is a man's job to protect his family, to protect his loved ones, to protect his community. And you are dishonoring your calling as a man to allow something like that to happen without doing everything you possibly can to protect your family and your community. So to say that to say that owning a gun and using a gun to protect yourself and to protect your loved ones goes against God is just nonsense. And I bring that up to talk to by way of introduction of this case where the ATF yet again botched a raid. And I talked about before the case in Arkansas, and the gentleman's name escapes me at the moment, where they did a raid on his house pre-dawn hours and ended up killing the man. And they did the same thing. Thankfully, they didn't kill anyone this time around, but they did the same thing. They executed a pre-dawn raid on a gentleman in Maryland by the name of Mark Manley, and he was up early because his family gets an early start every morning. So they were up at 4:30 in the morning when this raid took place. And so they saw it, his wife saw it, and he looked at his cameras and he yelled out the window to them and said, "Hey, we're here, we're complying." And it was at that point that they kicked in his door and threw a flashbang. I think they threw a flashbang right at that point. But they broke into his home, took his family out at gunpoint. And this happened in November in Maryland, so it was cold. Families just waking up. His son lived in the basement and had his room in the basement, and they threw a flashbang in his room and pulled him out of bed at gunpoint. And everyone is very blessed that nothing like what happened in Arkansas happened here. But let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this and just read what these people do. And by way of some good news, the ATF director, Brian Dettelbach, has resigned, thankfully. That useless. I talked about him before too, and you can go back and look where, excuse me, he talks about how he's not an expert in firearms. Well, why are you even? Anyway, let me not go down that road. But this story is infuriating because the ATF just doesn't learn their lesson. They just do not learn. They somehow they had this notion that this law-abiding citizen, this man, had all these guns. He was allegedly a felon in possession of firearms, and he's living in a fairly well-to-do neighborhood. And somehow, some way, they get word, and we'll get into that in a minute. But somehow, some way, they get word he has a bunch of guns and he is a danger, and they need to execute this raid on his home. A federal raid at the Baltimore home and he's a gun rights activist too, so that should have alarm bells going off in your head. ATF agents announced themselves to Mark Chopper Manley and his family by tossing a flashbang in his living room and ordering everyone out at gunpoint. The ATF's field office told the Washington Times that the search warrant is under seal. Well, isn't that convenient? And the only evidence they took out of after all this was a cell phone. And Manley feels like he was targeted because he had the number of guns he had in his home, which I believe was somewhere around 70. It may say in this article here. He is a gun rights activist. He organizes classes for people in his neighborhood. He's a teacher. He's a stand-up member of the community. There is no indication of any kind that he was a criminal. Yet somehow, some way, he was targeted by the ATF to the point where they had to execute a pre-dawn raid on his home in Maryland. Now, there are a couple of possible explanations for this. He was targeted by the ATF for being a gun rights activist, for being a Second Amendment advocate. That happens. That happens quite a bit. Or he was targeted by someone local. He managed to escape poverty and upbringing in poverty. A lot of his old associates, he thinks, may be jealous of his success. And so it could have been an issue of somebody jealous swatting him. I don't know that I really buy that. I think it's more along the lines of gun control advocates, whether they be in his community and saw him transporting guns in and out of his vehicles into his home, or whatever the case may be. Or he just landed on the ATF's radar and they just decided that they were going to try and intimidate him. Now, some people have suggested that there may be a racial element to it. He lives in he just moved really to a predominantly white neighborhood. And some people think that may be what triggered it, and it was swatting from that angle. That's possible, I guess, but I'm not really sure I buy that either. And for people who've been following me for a long time, you know that I don't really get into the whole race argument. Perhaps I should a little more, but I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up, all of my friends, 90% of my friends, were of Italian or Irish descent. And so I don't say that I don't see race. Obviously, to say that is ridiculous, but it just wasn't something that bothered me. And my parents didn't raise me or my siblings to focus on that. Have I been discriminated against? Possibly. It's never been something that was overtly in my face, but it's possible. I just keep it moving and on to the next opportunity. Work harder. You know what I mean? And so is this a racial thing? Possibly. But I think the evidence and the history of these types of things more than likely suggests that he was targeted for his stance on the Second Amendment. And all I can say to that is, thank God that we're going to have an administration in less than 3 weeks now that will put an end to this nonsense. That doesn't make certain rights second-class rights. That actually believes in rights, because the left right now, as far as they're concerned, there is no right to keep and bear arms, and they're doing everything they can to eliminate that. So, thankfully, that's not going to be the case for much longer, and thankfully, no one was hurt, because we know the ATF has been known to hurt people in situations like this. So thankfully, no one was hurt. But take a look at this story. I'll have the link to it in the show notes, and you can take a look at that and possibly contribute to his fund, because the ATF destroyed his home. He's going to have floors replaced. When they set the dogs in, the dogs took dumps all over his home. I mean, just total disrespect and destruction. Speaking of, we're going to move on to another case that has is definitely racially charged, and that is the Derek Chauvin case. Derek Chauvin was the police officer who was convicted of murdering George Floyd, and he's going to have another day in court. He is he's going to have another day in court, and I pray that it goes better than it did the last time for him. Now, when this first happened, I was among the people in the beginning who believed that Chauvin murdered Floyd. I wrote about it, said that in things I wrote, said that in some episodes of my old podcast. Said that if it wasn't murder, it was at least negligent homicide. I quickly came to realize, not as quickly as others, unfortunately, but I came to realize that I was completely, totally wrong. Completely wrong. Chauvin, it was proven that Chauvin followed the training of his department. He, and then other angles of the video showed exactly what happened. And I'm not going to try to relitigate the whole case now, but I was wrong. And then we come to the Hennepin County medical examiner's office, where the report, and this is what sealed it for me. By the time the report came out, I had already started to realize that I was wrong. But when this report came out, that was the kicker for me, because Derek Chauvin, George Floyd had lethal levels of fentanyl in his system, and I believe it was 4 times the amount that would kill most people. He had traces of weed and morphine in his system. He was a junkie, and it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. And the medical examiner's office didn't go so far as to say that it was an overdose. In fact, I think they took great pains to say that it wasn't an overdose. But how can you have 4 times the lethal level of fentanyl in your system and it not be an overdose? In fact, there was an independent medical examiner who said that if he had not known the circumstances of what was going on, he would have ruled it an overdose. And then the kicker there, well, there were plenty of kickers, but another nail in the coffin that should have gotten Chauvin acquitted was one of the jurors who during selection said that he didn't know anything about the case. In fact, let's take a look at it. I think I have it right here. The juror promised that he didn't know anything about the case and would be impartial. And come to find out that not only did he know about it, but he was photographed wearing a BLM shirt in 2020. A juror, and this is from the Post Millennial. This is an older article, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes as well. But a juror in the Derek Chauvin trial told the court that he had no prior knowledge of the George Floyd civil case, was photographed the previous August wearing a shirt that read, "Get your knee off our necks," and BLM, Black Lives Matter, by large mansions. Juror number 52, identified as Brandon Mitchell, told the judge they had no prior knowledge of the case. And I don't think there's a picture of him. Yeah, this one doesn't have a picture of him in the t-shirt, but that should have gotten this case thrown out, because he clearly was not impartial. And so the reason why Derek Chauvin is about to get a new trial, or at least the possibility of a new trial, is that his lawyer, and let's take a look at this one too, his lawyer didn't present all of the evidence. And I don't remember if it was because it hadn't been allowed, but he didn't present evidence. Evidence wasn't presented. Whether whose fault it was is unclear based on what I read so far. But there is now evidence, or there always has been evidence, it just was never presented, that George Floyd, on top of his drug history, the amount of drugs he had in his system, he also had a heart tumor. He had a heart tumor, and that was never brought up at trial. It was never examined. And so a judge has now granted permission for Derek Chauvin's lawyers to have samples of George Floyd's heart examined for evidence of this tumor that would have contributed to his death. U.S. District Judge Paul Magnuson agreed to an order on Monday to let the defense examine George Floyd's heart tissue and fluid samples to test a theory that Floyd died of a heart condition aggravated by a rare tumor, not, as prosecutors contend, from asphyxiation caused by the, and why did White off? Why did the, anyway, like I said, this has a definite racial overtones. Officer pressing knee on the back of Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes, despite Floyd's dying cries of, "I can't breathe." If you can say, "I can't breathe," you can breathe. You're breathing. Just wanted to put that out there too. And of course, everyone is up in arms, upset that that Chauvin could possibly get a new trial and possibly end up a free man. All I can say to that is I pray that happens, because he was railroaded. He was made an example of. I truly believe he was made an example of. People were afraid to acquit him, and because of all the riots that took place prior to the trial, and they didn't want to kick off another round of those riots. I am praying that this trial, that there is a new trial, and that justice prevails finally. All right, I do want to talk about Jimmy Carter's passing, but before we do, let's get in a word from our sponsor, Patriot Mobile. We've been using Patriot Mobile now for 3 or 4 months, and it is we should have done it a lot sooner than that, but especially now, because more than ever, it is important to support companies and organizations that share our values. Um, Despite the fact that Trump won, votes are not enough. We need to participate in a parallel economy. And Patriot Mobile not only shares our beliefs, but they actually do something about it. They are America's only Christian conservative wireless carrier, and they donate a portion of every dollar that you spend with them to organizations that fight for causes that you and I care about. So they have been tremendous on the border in terms of fighting human trafficking and things like that. They've been tremendous on the issue of transing kids. They've been fighting that every step of the way as well. They've just been a tremendous force in this fight. So switch to Patriot Mobile now and get a free month of service with the offer code Jackson. Go to patriotmobile.com and use promo code Jackson. Visit patriotmobile.com today. Okay. Jimmy Carter, former President Jimmy Carter, has passed away at the age of 100. He was born in 1924 and passed away in 2024. Now, I was a kid during the Carter era. And so obviously I didn't pay attention to any of the political machinations of the country or anything like that. But I do remember, I was old enough to remember at the time the way things were. I was old enough to remember the vehicles we were driving and the places we were living. I'm old enough to remember hearing my parents talk about money and talk about the gas shortage and all these things. And so I remember when Jimmy Carter won, and I remember that whole era. And then I remember when Ronald Reagan won, and I remember the difference. And I think that's what made me a conservative, like pretty much from the jump, was just seeing the difference in the way Democrats and Republicans handled the economy. And I had a vague understanding of hostage situations and the Middle East and things like that. Very vague. I was not a prodigy or anything like that. I wasn't paying that much of attention, but my parents were watching the news. I knew enough, and I could see it. And until Obama was elected, Jimmy Carter was, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of people, there are some people would say Woodrow Wilson, and that's a whole other debate. But in my opinion, he was and in my lifetime, he had been the worst president we had ever had. And that was until, obviously, like I said, Obama came along. And then now we're living through the absolute worst president in Biden. Bribing. And despite how terrible a president he was, there's not a lot of evidence that he was corrupt to the level that, or on any level really. I haven't seen any evidence that he was corrupt in that way, but he was a terrible president. His ideas, his leftist agenda was disastrous. He gave away the Panama Canal for $1. Russia invaded Afghanistan on his watch. We had hostages taken from an embassy in Iran on his watch, and a host of other. The economy was a disaster. That was the first time, and maybe in history, the first time we had stagflation. It was just a terrible, terrible time. And there are kids now who were my age then, growing up, seeing what Bribin is doing, and they may end up being conservatives based on this the same way I was. By all accounts, and I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but I have to be honest. By all accounts, the image that was portrayed of him as being this great guy, this decent guy, was a carefully crafted image. A carefully crafted image. There are reports that he was very nasty to his Secret Service detail. There are reports that he was nasty to certain reporters, that he was just a miserable person to be around, which is kind of the theme when it comes to leftists, because they always look like they're miserable. And when you see them posting on social media, and when you see their videos, and when you see them interacting on TV, they are very clearly miserable people. And Jimmy Carter, despite, like I said, the carefully crafted image of him being this decent guy, was all a mirage. Now, like I said, he hasn't been proven in any way. There have been no suspicion of him being corrupt, of him being a grifter, of him being on the take in any way, of him selling out the country. I'll give him that. But when it comes to evaluating former presidents like this, let's not sugarcoat it. Let's be honest about the record. And his record was abysmal. And so in the wake of his passing, I will say thank you to Jimmy Carter for giving us Ronald Reagan. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving us Ronald Reagan. All right. There are a couple other things I want to get to before we get you out of here. From the worst president of our lifetime, my lifetime anyway. Well, no, because that's now Bribin, but the worst president of my early childhood to the best president of some people's early childhood. President Trump has secured another victory with the help of Ken Paxton. And what Bribin has been doing everything he possibly can to make Trump's transition the rockiest, the roughest it could possibly be. He has been doing everything he can to sabotage Trump before he gets into office. And one of the things that he did, or was trying to do, was sell off the border wall that Trump secured and was trying to build during his presidency the first time. And when Bribin got into office, the first thing he did, one of the first orders he gave, was to shut down all that construction. And so that border wall that had been purchased was just sitting there. And so he decided he was going to go ahead and auction that off for pennies on the dollar, and fractions of pennies on the dollar. And Ken Paxton filed lawsuit with the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit has decided that that they agree with Ken Paxton, and they have ordered Biden to stop selling our border wall. And I mean, to sell our border wall, to leave our border wide open like that, has got to be treasonous. I mean, you're compromising on every level our national security. And I mean, even before you started doing it, I mean, our national security was severely compromised. But the Biden administration has agreed to the court order issued by the Fifth Circuit uh, to stop selling pieces of our border wall material. And it's just 3 weeks can't pass fast enough, as far as I'm concerned, because this guy has been a disaster of epic proportions. And one of the other things, if you take a look at this story right here, this follows our major victory following forcing Biden to build the wall. And we will hold this administration accountable for illegally subverting our nation's border security until the very last day in power, especially where their actions are clearly motivated by a desire to thwart President-elect Trump's immigration agenda. This is Ken Paxton addressing this issue. Joe Biden is as anti-American a president as there has ever been. I don't think there's been a president as anti-American, as traitorous as this guy. He is, without doubt, and I will debate this with anyone, he is without doubt the worst person ever to occupy the Oval Office. And on top of his obvious cognitive issues, on top of the fact that unelected bureaucrats have been running the country in his stead, this has got to be the worst 4 years in terms of presidential politics that I've ever seen. Now, the economy is terrible. Our border security is terrible. Our foreign policy is terrible. We've gotten into major conflicts. We've had major conflicts kick off as a result of his weakness and ineptitude. And it also it kind of makes you wonder if it's not, well, it is his weakness and ineptitude, because the unelected bureaucrats who are running the country in his stead probably planned a lot of this. You don't mess up the country this quickly. You don't have this many blunders. You don't have this many conflicts. You don't have this terrible an economy. You don't have this whole confluence of issues taking the country down. That doesn't happen by accident. All of these things going on, that does not happen by accident. And you can call me a conspiracy theorist if you want. I'll take that, because every conspiracy theory that has been floated over the past 4 years has turned out to be conspiracy fact. We're batting 1,000 with these alleged conspiracy theories. A conspiracy theory is just three months later, it's a fact. A conspiracy theory is just the early reporting. And so, like I said, Trump keeps winning, the country keeps winning. So 3 weeks, I believe it's 20 days from now, 3 weeks cannot pass quickly enough, as far as I'm concerned. And there are some there are some leftists who there are some leftists who seem to be coming around. And I'm not saying that these leftists are hardcore MAGA now or anything like that, but you have guys like Bill Maher, Leonard McKelvey, who goes by Charlemagne, and I'm not gonna say the rest of his screen name because it's just blasphemous. But Bill Maher, Leonard McKelvey, Cenk Uygur, and Anna Kasparian have, since this election, started to pay lip service to some of the things that we've been saying all along. They've been starting to, and there have been other people who have been making noises talking about how they should have they should have been more forceful in asking about Biden's cognitive decline and all that stuff. They didn't have to be more forceful in asking. All they had to do was just report accurately. That's it. That's all they had to do. But instead, they towed the line, and now the left is paying the price, and leftists have been at least receptive at this point to some of the things that we've been saying. And they've been finally conceding the point. The Wall Street Journal had an article where they talked about how Biden's handlers have been running the country. And I've heard reports from people who, and this is not confirmed, obviously, and this is hearsay, but from people who have knowledge of the situation, saying that they have been changing Biden's diapers. You can dismiss that if you want to, but I think it's not only is it not outside the realm of possibility, I think it's probable, just based on watching him over the past 4 years. But yeah, leftists like Bill Maher and Charlemagne and Cenk and Anna have been trying to make sense. Now, do I trust that they're genuine? I think Bill Maher is probably genuine. I don't think he's ever going to be. I don't think he's ever going to vote Republican. And Leonard McKelvey, he may be seeing some things that he's not comfortable with. And he may be genuine as well. And I know for a fact that Anna Kasparian is genuine, because this didn't start with the Democrats losing the election in November. She has been on this rightward lean for a while now. It started when she was assaulted in the street in LA, where she lives, and the reaction by her leftist colleagues to that. It started with her saying that she didn't want to be called a birthing person, and all of a sudden she was a TERF and anti-trans and all this other nonsense. And so she's been on a rightward lean for a while. So I think with her, it's genuine. With Cenk Uygur, her boss, her colleague, this is a grift. This is a grift. I don't trust him. I don't trust anything he says. I think he is like a lot of other leftist content creators. He saw his audience dwindle, like David Pakman and some of the other leftists who complained after the election that they lost a bunch of subscribers. I think he's seeing that, and I think he is trying to jump on the conservative Trump train to try and get some of those subscribers back and get some of that money back. But with Anna, like I said, I think it's genuine. And she did an interview with someone by the name of Brandy Cruz. And I'm not sure if Brandy Cruz is a conservative or not. I kind of get the idea that she's that she is. But from this interview, it was kind of hard to tell, and I haven't really done much of a deep dive into her background or anything like that. But I thought this interview, which I watched the whole thing, but I'm going to show you a clip of it. But I thought this interview was interesting because Anna Kasparian, like I said, she's been on this rightward lean, and she's been talking to people like Glenn Beck and Charlie Kirk and Michael Knowles and a bunch of other conservatives. And I think she's never. I don't think she's ever going to be a Trump voter. I don't think she's ever going to be a Republican voter. But she's one of the few leftists that you can actually have a conversation with that actually makes sense on some of the bigger issues. Not all of them, but some of the bigger ones. So I want to take a look at this video. And
you mentioned on tonight, you know, people were saying you almost looked happy, but it was more so for California results. You did not vote for Donald Trump. You did not vote for Kamala Harris, correct?
Correct.
So why didn't you vote for Harris?
Well, I think that Kamala Harris, I have a lot of issues with Kamala Harris. My main issue was that she really failed to be authentic and share a vision for the future of this country. She, to me, appeared to be an empty vessel. She didn't stand for anything. I despise neoconservatism. And so the fact that she was like parading around town with like Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney and talking about how honored she was to be endorsed by Dick Cheney, I was like, this is not someone who shares my values. So why would I vote for her? I get that
she's right. She's right. But there's another video. There's another one I wanted to show you. And this one, I think.
Well, I do think it's a sign of a shift.
More to the point. Check this out.
Situation on the ground doesn't improve. I do think that there's a chance that California could potentially even become a swing state. I know that sounds crazy,
Yeah, it does.
but Trump flipped 10 blue counties to red counties in California alone. Mm-hmm. And to me, that definitely stems from just the disorder, the sense that people are unsafe, you know, and I understand that the perspective or the perception of being unsafe is different from what the statistics might actually bear out, but the statistics aren't great. Okay, let's keep it real. And anyone who decides to point to the 90s to make a point about how crime isn't as bad as the 90s, like literally one of the worst periods in terms of crime spikes, you're not making a good argument, okay? We still have not seen crime go down to pre-2019 levels in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco. And
she's one of the few leftists who at least acknowledges this, because a lot of the other ones like David Pakman and Harry Sisson and Luke, whatever his name is, they all try to make excuses saying that those, when we talk about the FBI revising the numbers and things like that, that they don't include 2023 and 2024. But here's the problem. Most of the big cities like New York, Chicago, LA, Miami, they're not reporting their crime statistics. So of course it's going to look like these things, the crime has gone down, but crime has skyrocketed, and it's evident in those big cities that just aren't reporting the data. And Anna Kasparian is one of the few people who's willing to acknowledge that.
Sure, you can make the argument that some violent crimes have decreased, but it's not just about violent crime. If you're a working class person living in the most expensive state in the country because of taxes and because of housing, having your $2,000 catalytic converter stolen is devastating. You know, every time I renew my car insurance, 2 years in a row, no tickets, no car accidents, but my car insurance keeps doubling. And it's because of street takeovers. It's because of catalytic converter thefts. It's because of vehicle thefts. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So we're all paying a price. We're all subsidizing the criminality in our state. And it's unfair. And a lot of people living here have woken up to that and they want changes. Well,
I think it's safe to say that if Kamala decides to run for governor of California, which is one of the rumors going around, I don't think she's going to get Anna Kasparian's vote. Leftists, smart leftists who are willing to look at the situation on the ground and come to different conclusions based on that data. Like I said, they may not come around and completely flip to MAGA. They may not vote Republican and whatever the case may be, but they're at least willing to have the conversation. And she's one of them. And I probably trust her rightward lean more than any of the rest of them, because it's not something that happened overnight like with Cenk Uyghur. It's something that has been boiling and coming to the surface for a while now. And when it comes to people like that, it's nice to see, and those people are much more persuadable. And maybe there's a chance in 5 or 10 years she could be a full-fledged Republican. Who knows? But the fact that she's doing this, that's pretty remarkable. All right, I'm running out of time, but I did want to get this one last thing in here, and that is term limits. There is a Republican congresswoman who is now living, she's currently in office, now living in a memory care facility. Representative Kay Granger, who has not been seen for months, was finally located at a memory care facility. And the fact that she is, and it's not like this was early onset or anything like that. This woman has been in office now for, I'm not entirely sure at this point, but she's been in office for, I believe, since the 90s. And she is now living in a memory care facility. This is the greatest case for term limits that I've ever seen. These people should not be in office long enough to be put into a memory care facility. It's now, here's the thing. Will these people vote for limiting their own power? Probably not. Probably not. But we need to make them. We need to make it so uncomfortable for them that they finally go ahead and relent and vote for term limits, because we can't have this. We simply cannot have Republicans, Republicans, Democrats, whatever. We can't have our representatives aging in office to the point where they end up in nursing homes and memory care facilities. That just can't happen. There needs to be term limits and maybe even age limits. I don't know. That's something we can talk about. But we'll get into that a little bit more with some of these other octogenarians who are in office, I'm sure. But that's all I got for you folks. That's all I got for you this time. I will try to do better the next time. The next time will be 2025. But please remember to hit that like button, subscribe, comment on these videos, share these episodes, because we want to spread the word of Jesus Christ, spread the word of biblical conservatism and hope and liberty, because we want to preserve this for future generations. And if you like the shirt I'm wearing, go ahead and head over to missionreadymen.com, click shop, and check out this design and all the other ones that we have available for you. Missionreadymen.com, shop 7 Armors. And as always, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away, but the Lord is right there with you. So keep your prayers going up and your head on a swivel. God bless.